Have you ever tried to memorize the notes on the guitar fretboard, but given up because it never seemed to stick no matter how much effort you put in? If so, you're in luck, because today I'm going to show you how to quickly memorize the note names on the guitar fretboard. Hi, I'm Jason at Fretboard Foundation. I help guitarists play with creativity and fluency by focusing on practical music theory and mindful listening. Learn more at fretboardfoundation.com. It's really useful for guitarists to learn the notes on the fretboard for a number of reasons. It lets us navigate the fretboard freely, finding the right positions to play chords, scales, and melodies. It helps us communicate with other musicians, and it makes it easier to understand patterns and relationships on the fretboard. I've tried a lot of different approaches for memorizing notes on the fretboard, from exercises to apps to rote repetition, but I could never remember the notes for long. The one thing that finally worked was to use mnemonics. Mnemonics are a memory technique that helps us remember information by associating it with something else. In this case, the mnemonics are short phrases, where the first letter of each word is the name of a note. They often seem silly, but they can be remarkably effective. To make them even easier to remember, pair the phrases with a related image. This is called multimodal memorization, and it helps us retain things longer and recall them more quickly. There are a lot of notes on the fretboard. There are 72 notes just in the first 12 frets. No wonder it's so hard to memorize them all. But fortunately, we don't have to memorize them all. If we know the note names at a handful of key locations, we can actually deduce the rest of them pretty easily. For example, if we know the location of a natural note, we know that the sharp note is 1 fret higher and the flat note is 1 fret lower. Let's start with the notes on the open strings. You probably know these already since you need to know them in order to tune your guitar. The open strings from lowest to highest are E, A, D, G, B, and E. A mnemonic to remember them is Eddie ate dynamite, goodbye Eddie. This is an old one. I learned it when I was a kid. Maybe you've heard it before too. Next, learn the notes on the 2 lowest strings. This is useful because it lets us play any chord using the most common movable chord shapes. We'll start by memorizing the notes at the 3rd, 5th, and 7th frets. Those are the first 3 fret markers on the fretboard. Also notice that there's a C and F at the 8th fret, 1 fret higher than the B and E on the 7th fret. We don't have to spend any effort memorizing the C and F, since they're easily identified once we've memorized the B and E. I learned the mnemonics for these 6 notes from Justin Sanderco over at justinguitar.com. I tried to locate his video about it, but I couldn't find it. It was probably at least 15 years old, and his site has grown a lot. If anyone knows where to find that video, please share it in the comments and I'll post a link. The notes at the 3rd fret on the 2 lowest strings are G and C. The mnemonic is 3 gay cats. And here's an image to help you remember that. The notes at the 5th fret on the 2 lowest strings are A and D. The mnemonic is 5 able digits. Digits are another word for fingers. We have 5 fingers, which helps us remember that it's the 5th fret. The notes at the 7th fret on the 2 lowest strings are B and E. The mnemonic is 7 beautiful elephants. The notes at the 12th fret have the same names as the open strings, because the 12th fret is where the octave repeats. It's a long way between the 7th fret and the 12th fret. So I found it helpful to add one more mnemonic for the notes at the 10th fret. Notice that unlike the 3rd, 5th, and 7th frets, the 10th fret does not have a fret marker on guitar. The notes at the 10th fret on the 2 lowest strings are D and G. The mnemonic is 10 decades gone. A decade is 10 years, which helps us remember it's the 10th fret. Spend some time practicing with the notes on the bottom 2 strings. It's best not to try to memorize more than 5 to 7 new things at once, so get comfortable with the notes on the bottom 2 strings before you start working on the next step. Next, we'll memorize the notes on the top 3 strings. It's useful to know these when soloing because that's usually done on the upper strings. It also helps when playing treble triads, which are used extensively in the Fretboard Foundation method. The mnemonics for the top 3 strings are given in descending order because the Fretboard Foundation method starts by focusing on the highest string and descends from there to build out chords and scales. For example, while the mnemonic for all the open strings is Eddie ate dynamite, goodbye Eddie, a mnemonic for the top 3 open strings in descending order is Eddie be gone for E, B, and G. These mnemonics for the top 3 strings all begin with the same word as those for the bottom 2 strings. It builds on our memorization of those mnemonics with the least possible confusion. We can distinguish between the mnemonics for the top and the bottom strings because the top strings have 3 words and the bottom strings have 2 words. The notes at the 3rd fret on the top 3 strings in descending order are G, D, and B flat. The mnemonic is 3 gay dogs B flat. And here's a picture of that. Notice we kept the same theme as the 3 gay cats mnemonic from the bottom 2 strings. I know that B flat is a bit of a stretch, but I find it memorable. The dogs are laying down flat. Get it? The notes at the 5th fret on the top 3 strings, descending, are A, E, and C. And the mnemonic is 5 Able End Calluses. Our 5 able digits have calluses on the ends of the fingers. The notes at the 7th fret on the top 3 strings, descending, are B, F sharp, and D. The mnemonic is 7 beautiful for sure daisies. For sure stands for F sharp. It's hard coming up with mnemonics for flats and sharps, but it's memorable, I hope. The notes at the 10th fret on the top 3 strings, descending, are D, A, and F. And the mnemonic is 10 decades are flying. The decades are flying by. That's why the bottom strings have 10 decades gone. What about the 4th string? I find it's best to identify the notes on the 4th string by using octave shapes to find the matching notes on the 1st, 2nd, and 6th strings. That's because when building chords and scales with a 4th string root, it's useful to think in terms of those octave shapes as well. A note on the 4th string is the same as the notes 2 frets lower on the 1st and 6th strings. That's used in the E-shaped bar chord. A note on the 4th string is also the same as the note 3 frets higher on the 2nd string. That's used in the D-shaped caged chord. There are 2 good ways to practice this. First, from a location on the fretboard, identify the note. For example, consider the note at the 2nd fret, 6th string. We don't have a mnemonic for that fret, but we know our 3 gay cats, so the 3rd fret is G. So 1 fret below it must be F sharp. Here's a second way to practice. Given a note, find it on the fretboard. That's a little harder to do. You'll know you're making progress memorizing the notes when this exercise gets easier. A good way to practice is to play a single note everywhere on the fretboard. You can use the diagrams like this one from the free Fretboard Foundation book for reference. I'll link to it in the description. For example, start with this middle C note on the 1st fret, 2nd string, and play the identical pitch on all the other strings, going down at an angle like this. Play all the C notes on the guitar in this way. It really helps you get a feel for how the fretboard is laid out. If you want to learn more about practical music theory on guitar and how to improvise and play by ear, download the free book, Fretboard Foundation, Practical Building Blocks for Intermediate Guitarists. Or check out the fretboardfoundation.com website for more free video lessons and other ways to learn. At this point, you should have everything you need to identify all the notes on the fretboard. Let me know how it works out for you. Thanks so much for watching. I really appreciate it. Until next time, peace.